I wanted to be really cool for this thing, but I also wanted to be warm.
You could only be cooler if you popped the collar and started doing the Fonzie thing.
We can do it.
We could do it. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Oh, wait.
This is a video podcast. We can't do that.
That's hilarious. So welcome to the Caffeinated Theology Pastor Talk vlog series, as we're working to work through some different topics concerning the pastor and how theology relates to the everyday life of a pastor and theologian. And so today I am joined once again by my brother David Norman, who is a professor, right? A professor. Howdy. I was talking to him just a minute ago, and he's signing some professorly documents, teaching classes. It was pretty important, right? I saw
Yes, I'm a very important person.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely you are. And the other important person that I have on the line here with me is Sean Wagner. He's pastor of First Baptist Church Somerville in Somerville, Georgia, and he's doing a fantastic job up there. He's looking all dapper today in his leather jacket.
I forgot to turn the heat on. It's like 45 degrees in here.
So it was out of necessity. It wasn't out of style.
I wanted to be really cool for this thing, but I also wanted to be warm.
You could only be cooler if you popped the collar and started doing the Fonzie thing.
We can do it.
We could do it. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Oh, wait.
This is a video podcast. We can't do that.
That's hilarious. And I'm your host today. I'm Pastor Anthony SWANA from Harvey Baptist Church in Stephenville, Texas. Now, the way we all came together is we are a bunch of gooberhead theologian pastors from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. We went through PhD classes together, and we really wanted to talk through some of these difficult topics in which pastors walk through. Now, today I want to tell you, as we get started, this is an open-ended discussion. And so if you have any ideas or thoughts on these topics that we're going to be working through, make sure that you like and subscribe to these videos, and then also post in the comments. That way we can respond to those comments and maybe even do a follow-up video at a later time to some of the things and issues that were discussed in those areas. So today we are going to be talking about a process of assimilation in a church. What does that look like? Is it important? And how do you create one of those? So as we work through this, let's start with the very basic. David, what do you think about this? Is this a necessity for a church to have?
I absolutely think it is. We often hear talks of closing the back door of the church. So the first church that I went on staff at as a full-time senior pastor, in the previous year and a half, they had reached 1,000 visitors, and they were still running less than 60 on Sunday morning. And it was because no one was sticking. And so my task when I came in as senior pastor of this church, it wasn't necessarily to help them with outreach. They were doing outreach. They were doing effective outreach. The problem was they weren't doing assimilation. And so that was where I was able to come in and kind of shore some things up.
So you think a process of assimilation is really to just kind of capture people and hold them there?
Well, it's to capture people and hold them there, but it's certainly for the purpose of discipleship. So it's for the purpose of making disciples. It's not just a holding pen, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sean, what do you think about this? I mean, when you think of like an assimilation process in a church, kind of give me your vision. You're a pastor now. What does that look like for your church? Maybe give me some ideas on why this is important, so on.
Well, the first time I heard the word assimilating new members, the only thing I could think of was Star Trek and the Borg trying to make everybody one and the same. And you're just going, what are we talking about? But really what it is, the process is helping someone who's brand new and to the church. And anytime you're brand new to the church, it's awkward. You could be a longtime church member anywhere, but the moment you've got to move someplace and try to plug into a new place, it is awkward. So the object is to help people feel a part of the family as quick as possible and to get them in ministry. I like to tell people the best way to find a church is not to find a place where, all of your personal preferences are met, but is someplace you can plug in and do ministry. So the process of assimilating is helping people to plug into a ministry as soon as possible, to get them using their talents for Christ and working together to know the body. it's so much easier to make friends when you're a part of a ministry team.
Absolutely. It's kind of removing the awkwardness of being a visitor at church and trying to figure out where do you fit and things like that. I find that as a pastor, I've seen that it's incredibly awkward for people to join a church. Because even if you're a committed Christian and you're moving from a church, let's say you were spending, 15 years out previously, you know your Bible, but then you walk into a new context, nobody knows you. They don't know what you believe. They don't know who you are. They don't know your background or your family. And so there's this period where you're kind of going like, how do I invest in these people? And do these people even want to invest in me?
Right.
What I seek to do through a process of assimilation is I try and shorten that period of awkwardness for people. I want to get plugged in so quickly that it doesn't, it's not weird or anything like that for them. So that's the hope that we have here at Harvey.
Yeah, I think
less awkwardness.
Less awkwardness, yes. It's weird. It's always weird to some point because we're all weird. I mean, let's just be honest. We all have our own.
Church is an odd thing. In the context here, we went and visited a church, and I mean, we came in, and the first thing everyone was doing is saying, we love you so much, and they were hugging us and kissing us on the cheek, and it was like, all right, I don't know you. So this can be an awkward thing, and it's the job of the pastor to try to help remove some of that awkwardness. Look, we love people, but don't be creepy.
You can be too creepy. It's funny, whenever we get that way, we think we're being loving, but sometimes it just comes off as being needy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a crazy thing as well.
It's the creepy it's the creepy girl on the first date, right? She's already talking about
what?
She's already talking about wedding plans and naming your kids, and you're like, whoa, no. I would like to get to know you first.
Oh,
have y'all seen How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days?
Yes, yeah.
Where the lady, they're on the date and she's pulling out that scrapbook where she's molded their faces in to show pictures of their children on their future vacations. Yeah, don't do that as a church.
I feel like Facebook already has a setting for that.
Oh, I'm sure they do. They have some kind of filter or something like that. Maybe it's on Snapchat. I don't know. I'm not there. But
things not to do as a pastor. Here's your face in our last Christmas photo. This is what it'd be like if you were here.
Oh my gosh. We had a family photo like that one time that we took, and my brother-in-law was out of town. And so we literally took a picture with a space. And so he could Photoshop himself into our Christmas.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, right.
That is the epitome of family involvement.
That's right. That's the level I aim for.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So back on topic.
Okay. So yeah, if we don't want to be the creepy church, right? We don't want to be the wild, needy girlfriend church. What are some, I guess, things that you're doing as far as assimilation process? Some things that you maybe have seen done or your church is practicing now? I
think the best way to start is to make sure you at least have a new members class of some kind. Some way to teach them the culture of your church and what you believe and what you're doing, why you're doing it. Just some way to even introduce and explain. And so for our church, our new members we're not going to end up having 10 new members in a class. So the best way to do it is to go out to lunch or go out to dinner and just talk with them and get to know them. Most of our guests and members are related to somebody here, or friendships are here. So I like to bring the person who invited those people with us and try to get to know them over coffee or tea or lunch or dinner, whatever we can do, just to talk with them and get to know them and to say, okay, well, what do you see your place in this church is? A lot of times people are going to start by saying, okay, well, we wanted to come to your church because of the preaching, because of this, all these things that benefit them. I try to turn the conversation quickly to, okay, why be a member here? Where are you going to serve? What do you see yourself doing?
I hear you. So how are you, when you have a visitor come to your church, Sean, how are you capturing information? How do you know that they're a visitor? And maybe what are your next steps as a pastor? Are there any steps before taking them to lunch with another member? Or walk me through that process. Say I'm a visitor at your church. What happens with you? And me from
You're a visitor at our church and you don't have a family tie here. It's rare, but it happens. So we've got a connect card and we have that fill out. It got name information. Just if you want a pastoral visit or not is on that card. And the main thing is to get a phone number or an address for us to be able to contact you. After that, then I'll contact them, call them maybe Tuesday, Thursday range and during the first week, and just get to talk with them and say, thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, I'd be willing to answer them. Then after that, if they come again, we try to follow up with that. And I try to have a deacon or somebody else follow up as well to come in and say, okay, here's another member of our church who's interested in getting to know you. And even possibly someone who could disciple you if that's where we're looking. But if you are a relation to somebody in our church, and that's most of our guests right now, then I want to have that member, the person that you know, the family member, meet together, and we kind of go directly to meeting together, coffee, lunch, or something that way, because we already know you. We already have your information. You've been living in Somerville for your entire life. Everyone knows you.
Yeah. So is there a time period that you wait? So like, I guess first week you're calling them, second week you're trying to assimilate them with somebody else who wants to get to know them. Is it like third week you're taking them out to lunch, or are you waiting?
I try to do that. Try to get to lunch with them within a month, especially if they've come multiple times.
Okay.
You have those guests who come once and you contact them and you'll never see them again.
Right.
So I would say, okay, if you've put in the effort once, twice, and nothing is coming of it, move on.
Yeah, that was kind of my philosophy. Was the first time someone visited, they generally got a quick email, which was usually a form email if they gave us an email address, right? Mm-hmm. They got a quick email. They got a handwritten letter from me. It would be 2 sentences on a card, and then I'd give them a phone call on Tuesday. And so that's what you got your first time. Your second time, I invited you to coffee. And then once every 2 months, if I'm not mistaken, we had a dessert at the pastor's, which again, talking about trying to find ways to remove that barrier of awkwardness, kind of the idea of presenting the pastor as a normal human being with kids' toys on the floor and,
potty charts on the wall.
I do have a bookshelf of Bibles, but, we didn't have a Bible in every room situated for everybody to, but the idea was to very much connect on a personal level. And so we would invite our elders, we would invite a handful of church leaders, and then we would invite those guests, whether they be first, second, however many, if they're new over the course of those 2 months. The idea was to try and help provide an atmosphere for them to make personal, relational connections.
That's good.
What do you do, Anthony?
So one of the things we do several things. We first of all, it starts off. Say what?
Let's name one.
Yeah. So this is something that's been on my heart quite a bit over the last year, because when I came to my church, we were that church who saw 1 billion visitors over the course of a year, and our back door was very wide open. So we would have people come, and they would even come for 6 months, and then they wouldn't get plugged in, and then it was just like, where'd you go? Like, what happened? And so I've been almost over emphasizing this with a lot of my people and stuff. And so I'll walk you through our process. What we do is we do visitor cards every, or connection cards is what we call them. We do connection cards every Sunday where everybody fills them out. Mm-hmm. Even members. We try and remove that barrier, that awkwardness of, oh, hey, there's a visitor filling out a card.
Everybody does it.
So everybody does it.
Okay.
And we collect all of those cards. We've seen our retention rate on cards like skyrocket because, which has been fantastic. From there on the back end, that is brought into a Google document that our staff shares. The first week will send them a personal email, and I've started doing something kind of interesting. I got an idea from Joel Sutherland back at a conference, and one of the things he was doing is he sends them a short video just saying, hey, Pastor Joel here. Love that you came and visited with us. You had a million choices in the world to take on church, and we're just glad that you worshiped with us. If you need anything from me, shoot me an email or give me a call or something like that. It's been really cool because over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've seen a much better response than just a canned email or even a handwritten card, which has been really fantastic. So I've started doing that. And then on that Google document sheet, I then assign those visitors to at least one area of ministry among my staff. And so if they have little kids, I'll have our children's minister connect them. If they have students, I'll have my student minister contact them. If they're in another area of ministry, I'll divvy that up depending on who would best fit with them. The next thing I do is I then contact a Sunday school leader, and I have a Sunday school leader contact them. And the Sunday school leader contact usually happens between week 2 and week 3. So in the first week, they're getting a video from me. They're getting a personal phone call from one of my staff members. In week 2 and week 3, they're getting a call from a Sunday school teacher, inviting them to their class. And then we do new members class once a month. And so sometime in the month, depending on when that new members class is, usually it's the last week of the previous month, they'll get an invite from our church secretary inviting them to the new member class. And then, and that's a time where we try and keep those classes relatively small. We try and keep them anywhere between 8 and 15 people because I'm trying to figure out who they are, what they believe, where they come from, how they heard from the church, all those type of things, and create relationships in there. And in that new member class, we have pretty much every one of our staff members in there because I want them fielding that class as well. And essentially through that 3-week to a month-and-a-half process, my purpose in there is to make sure that they know who we are and make sure we know who they are. Yeah. That's it. And then at that new member class, I'm asking for some kind of a commitment at that point. So we've all mentioned a new member class or a pastor dinner or something like that. Let me ask you guys this. In this process of assimilation, what is essential information to have in a new member class?
In a new member class, I think it's essential to let them know the identity of your church. First being theological. We are a Baptist church. Most people have no idea why they're joining a Baptist church. They probably just like your worship or your preaching style or something. Or, we've always been Baptist. So I think it's essential to say, we are different from, say, a Presbyterian or a United Methodist church, and here's why. If you come on Wednesdays, all of a sudden we're going to have a business meeting once a month. What is that about?
Right.
Why are we doing that? Why do you, as a member, have a right to vote? Not every church does that. So our church does it. Here's why. I also think the other essential things you need to cover is what we mean by the Bible. When we say this is the word of God, what do we mean? What do we mean Jesus Christ is Lord? And define that for someone at a meeting. And the other one is baptism and the Lord's Supper. I think you need to cover those in your new members class so that everyone knows, hey, when we do baptism, this is what we mean. We don't believe this confers the Holy Spirit on you. We don't believe this is saving you. And you say, well, duh, that's a Baptist church. Well, not every new member gets that because they haven't always been taught that. They may have been Baptist forever and have no idea what it means to be baptized. So you got to look at that. And then the Lord's Supper, I think, is important too, because every different church, even in Baptistdom, has a slightly different take on the Lord's Supper. Are we closed? Are we open? Are we somewhat open? Are we somewhat closed? Well, how do we define that? And why are we using grape juice, or what bread are we? Why are we doing this? Those are good things to cover.
See, and I think those are all important things. I think for me, I would step it back, but especially considering, right, so we're talking about new members class, but even when I'm talking about a dessert with the pastor, something like that, I'm bringing that way back. So my goal in that situation, that's not necessarily a new members or a new believers class. That is straight introductions. That is trying to create that relational connection between that person and the pastor, and trying to create that relational connection between that person and somebody else. Doesn't have to be, it can be an elder, it can be a ministry leader. My goal was when they leave there, they feel a relationship exists between them and two people from our church at a minimum. That's our goal. Yeah. Now, the believers class, I kind of changed that up again. At a new members class, again, I'm not going to hammer home the Baptist distinctives, which is saying something because I'm Mr. Baptist Distinctive teaching Baptist history. But in a new members class, I'm going to drive home the gospel. I'm going to drive home and try and clarify, what do we mean by salvation? What do we mean by Jesus Christ on the cross? I'm going to drive home that emphasis, and then I'm going to be moving them toward, or hopefully helping them to make that commitment, make that decision, and then moving them toward baptism and or the Lord's Supper. Some of them will already have that experience, but I'm going to be trying to explain the gospel first and how that relates in the life of the church to baptism and the Lord's Supper. And then we're going to talk about membership. But in a new members class, new believers class, that's where I'm really driving home. I don't necessarily feel the need to set myself apart denominationally. What I want to do is really keep the main thing, because that's the main thing, and drive that. And then kind of come up behind and clean up after the fact. But I want to drive home that important stuff first.
Absolutely. We're kind of similar to that too. We cover three major areas: beliefs. What do we hold to be true? So we're going to cover some just low-level Christian doctrine, and even Baptist beliefs. So we're going to hold, first of all, salvation. I describe salvation overly in the new members class. And the reason is I find that a lot of people, they may be going through some kind of like spiritual stirring in their life where God is drawing them in, and they just don't know how to make that connection. They don't know how to get there. And so I've had several people accept the Lord in new members class. Next thing is baptism. And I talk about believers' baptism and baptism by immersion. We hold that to be a key element of what we believe. And we walk through that. And it's been interesting because I've had several people have different forms of baptism go, oh, I was never taught that. And then they go, oh, I need to be baptized. I actually need to be baptized.
Right. And we had that recently.
And then the next thing I do is, as far as our belief system and what we hold to be true, is the inerrancy of the Bible. That's another big one that we work through. What does it mean to say that the Bible is inerrant and true and holy, and we abide by it? And then from there, those are kind of the doctrine things that I work through in our new members class. The other stuff I'll pick up on in a Bible study or something like that, as far as teaching on the Lord's Supper or teaching on other Christian doctrines. But from there, I move into unity. What does it mean to be united with the church, and why is that important? How does a person become united in a church? So I'm focusing then on finding places where they can plug in to grow in their relationship with Christ, either through a discipleship relationship or Sunday schools or whatever that may be. I talk about church attendance and why that's important. And then I also go into not just growing in your relationship with God, but growing in your acts of service. So, for example, we walk through a spiritual gifts test, and then we walk through how do you get plugged into serving in my church. And the whole point in that is to try and unify them, give them some kind of ownership and some kind of next steps out of that deal. I find that so many people, what they do is they go through new member class and they go, oh, I'm a member now. And then they never really get involved as a member. And that's a dangerous thing. So I'm trying to show them, how do they become unified into a church? By growing, finding relationships that will encourage them to grow, and then also finding relationships that will encourage them to serve, and then also finding ways in which they can support the church. And so that would be our business meetings, that would be giving and stewardship, that would be all those type of things. And then the final thing that we go through, so we have belief, we have unity, and then the final thing is mission. What is the purpose of our church? Why are we here? What are we doing? Where are we going? What does that look like? And so I roll through the commission of the church. What is the purpose of the church? It's not here to serve us. It's here to go and make disciples. And we walk through, why do we have the the identity, the DNA that we do have. And we've mentioned this in a previous episode, but I'll tell you again, for our churches, we are a family on mission to make disciples. And so what does that mean for us as a church? Whenever you're joining and unifying with us as a church, is that you are going to be a disciple and you are going to find somebody to disciple. There are 2 accountability statements there that they need to know on the front end, that we are asking you to be in one of those 2 processes, and everything around the church is going to be involved in those 2 processes. And so we really ask them to align in belief, in unity, and then also in mission. Because I don't want people to come here and be like, well, I joined the church and now I have my name written in the Lamb's Book of Life, and and then never come up and never connect, you know.